Hi, I'm Rob Spall.
And I'm Britt Garner.
Welcome to Nature Insight.
Speed dating with the future.
This is the IPBES podcast, where we open a window for you to get a better look at the inner workings of biodiversity science and policy, and we share with you unique personal stories from those on the front lines of research and action for people and nature.
Oh, Rob, it's that time again. We have reached the final episode of the season.
Crazy.
I know, although I am sad to almost be done, I will say, in just 6 weeks, we went from the heights of the Himalayas in pursuit of undiscovered mushrooms all the way to the frozen expanses of Antarctica and beyond to advance our understanding and appreciation of biodiversity science and policy. It has been quite a ride.
It's our last episode of Season 3. It's hard to believe, Britt, it's been 3 years already. 18 episodes, more than 40 guests, and so many great stories and so many insights. To all of you who've joined us on our speed dates with the future, a big thanks for your support and your continued interest in the work that's being done by everyone in the IPBES community. It seems fitting, Britt, that we close this season with an episode looking firmly at the future, or at least on those who are going to be inheriting it. One of the defining features for me of the global environment crisis has been the very vocal refusal of young people to simply inherit a world where nature has been so exploited by those who came before. In every country, youth are the voices that are really demanding the kind of transformative change that the IPBES science has shown to be so necessary.
Big time, Rob. We've all seen Greta Thunberg growing into basically an international icon. How many other young people have been inspired to follow her example? Their passion, their commitment to honestly demanding change have really raised the urgency of these issues, I think, at every level.
And it's one of the reasons why at IPBES we believe so firmly in the importance of including the knowledge and the perspectives of young people in our work. We've talked a lot about this season, about stakeholders and the values of diverse voices. Britt, youth are a vital part of that diversity, and I don't think I need to tell you that.
Oh, 100%. Though I do think about IPBES and the fact that it's a science policy platform. Most young people I know might think they're interested in science or policy, but they're still kind of grappling with what those words and concepts really are. So what is it that IPBES really specifically values in that collaboration?
You're right, Britt. Most young people don't have the kinds of experience that the experts who engage with IPBES typically do have. So years of formal academic credentials, years of research and publication experience. But what youth does have are fresh and often innovative perspectives and approaches to issues. Not to mention, and this we've talked about before, the energy and the passion to really drive transformative change now and into the future. Many young people are also obviously very connected in their own communities, and they bring those networks to their work with IPBES.
Totally agree. And, we've done enough of these that I have a feeling you may have interviewed someone that has something to do with this topic, yes?
That's entirely possible. Diem Hong Thi Tran is one of our colleagues from the IPBES Technical Support Unit on Capacity Building, which drives many of the initiatives, including regular workshops that IPBES uses to engage young people with our work. Hong wanted to talk about why and how we focus on youth and what youth are able to contribute to the IPBES process, as well as what they might get out of it. So, Hong, I think a lot of people, when they think about IPBES, they think about scientists, they think about people in government, they think about policymakers. I don't think youth is the first thing that comes to people's minds when they're thinking about something like the IPBES work. What is it that youth bring to the table? Why is it important to be engaging with youth as a science policy platform?
There is a recognition from especially the findings of the values assessment that we need to have a more inclusive process. We need to have more voices. We need to include more values into our decisions. Youth, they come with their values, their perspective, and their engagement. And also their impatientness, they want things to happen. They are holding people in power accountable. So I think by bringing in youth in the conversations, we also introduce the urgency of the matter.
What do you think the youth get out of it? I mean, it's an investment of time and energy from their part to be part of these processes. Is there something that they take away from a process like this?
There is a need for, building the capacities on the findings of IPBES assessment. Having that knowledge will support them in their advocacy for nature. And I think that is where we see a good relationship between us. We help them so that they have the knowledge and can build their actions on the knowledge base that IPBES has produced. And in return, they also take part and drive the process forward. So I think it's a win-win situation for both.
One of the ways that IPBES has tried to engage with youth through the work that you and our colleagues at the Capacity Building Technical Support Unit have done is through workshops and through meetings with youth representatives. I remember one of those was last year at the workshop that was held in Germany. I think it was on the Isle of Vilm. What was that like?
I don't know if you've been to the Isle of Vilm.
No.
But it's really a tiny island. It is a protected place where only a few have the opportunities to go there, stay there, and work there.
On film, successful nature conservation is not just theory. It can be seen and experienced all around. The woodlands on film have stayed uncultivated for 400 years. Unshaped by human activity, they have developed entirely naturally.
So we wanted to bring, young people from all around the world, 25 in total, and we want to draw on their contributions on how they explore nature futures as part of our IPBES work on scenarios and models. And, spending time together, 3 whole days just by ourselves, having this unique environment surrounding us. And we were working from morning till evening and everyone was so engaged and there were so many activities going on. But also, they bounded really immediately. And it's like, people that really didn't know each other from the beginning at all, within 10, 15 minutes, just connected and worked so well together. It was a really wonderful experience.
Working morning to night sounds quite hard work. Was it also fun?
Absolutely. Not to, say anything bad about all the people, because I'm in that category as well. But the enthusiastic and, the craziness and the impulsiveness, they were active and they just go, do, and really just get things done. And very, very, very active.
Were you youthful enough to keep up with the youth when they were having fun?
Well, I tried to, but I sometimes had to, step back and then just let them, do their things. And then I go back to my room, refresh a little bit, and then, of course, rejoin them when needed. They needed some time alone as well.
You mentioned that they were having discussions around the Nature Futures Framework. And obviously that's a heavy-sounding concept, the Nature Futures Framework. How do youth fit into something like looking at what the future of nature would be?
I think that's also where we come back to, wanted to bring a wider, broader perspective of visions for positive nature futures.
Is it?
So, it was a really interesting process following them in their, recognitions of, for example, what type of technologies that exist today has the potential to develop to be something that is really transformative, and having them, their creativities to discuss and really, this is something that really engaged them, because you see that they want to share their knowledge, they want to share their experience and really to give input to the work. And I have to tell you a little bit more about, because this was the second workshop that we organized. The first one we did was in Brazil in 2019. And it also shows that the commitment with IPBES go beyond, just taking part in the workshop. Because the youth participants in the first workshop did go together and wrote an article based on their experience from that workshop. And the same has been done now for the second workshop at the Isle of Bill. We can see that they are really active and they're working really hard trying to pull together the findings there and to write up something so that they can share their experience with a broader audience.
One of the things that always stands out for me about the work that you do on youth engagement is how broad the groupings of youth that you bring together are. I mean, I know, for instance, that there's a focus on trying to bring in youth from different communities and different cultures and different knowledge systems. Was there any contribution that stood out for you as perhaps an unexpected voice or an unexpected perspective that you can share with us?
You never know who you meet, because for both of the workshops, we got a lot of applicants. And then, of course, we really have to do a selections, but we never know who you actually meet until you meet them,
Sure.
at the airport, getting on the bus, going to the Isle of Film. But what is really in common for those that we meet is that they are really active. They are really passionate about the work they do. And most strikingly, they are really good communicators. They are passionate, but they communicate in a very clear and convincing way.
We're going to have the great privilege of hearing from one of those participants who I think is exactly the kind of participant you're describing, Kantuta from Bolivia, who we'll be speaking to later in this episode as well. But let me ask you this. How is it that IPBES then engages with youth? What sort of options do young people have to engage with our work? I mean, it's not just workshops, right?
We really see that we don't manage to, provide opportunities for all the youth out there that wants to engage with us and to try to amplify the work that we do. The youth that we engage directly with, we also, approach them with the concept that we build your capacities so that you can build the capacities of others in your communities, in your network, and in other ways to amplify the work that we do and manage to reach out to all people.
Sure, it may make sense. I mean, we wish we could speak to all of the youth, but we need to find the youth who will speak to other youth.
Yeah, so that said, from the beginning, we initiated the IPBES fellowship program that was really, really proven to be so successful. And so far, we have 126 fellows, if I remember the number correctly, and they are from more than 66 nationalities. And you can imagine, the different values and perspectives that they bring into the work of IPBES, in addition to being, young and have the courage to try new things and bring the innovations into the IPBES process. That is something that we really appreciate.
I mean, the Nature Insight podcast has benefited from these fellows. In season 2, we had an episode that focused entirely on the fellowship program. We've spoken this season to one of the IPBES fellows.
I listened to the episode on the fellowship program. It was a really enjoyable listening. So I really, if you are interested in the program, go and listen to that episode. I mean, Lalani shared her experience so well in that episode.
The beginning was overwhelming. I am not even going to pretend.
Very fair.
Once you're actually there and you see all these people and all these experts from around the world, when you hear the accents and where they're all from and their disciplines, and you see somehow how they're interconnected, and then you hear about all these other structures. And then when you kind of calm down a little bit, you look around the room and you see people that you have been citing all these years. And I think that, that's kind of pinch me moment.
Amazing.
What other sorts of opportunities are there for youth participation?
So I wanted to touch upon the youth workshop. You learn about IPBES, you learn about IPBES processes and work. And then, of course, in return, we also would like to hear from, youth how we can support their engagement with IPBES and what kind of contributions they can bring to the table.
How specific does this get? I mean, obviously, IPBES works on assessment reports that deal with specific topics. We've done pollination, we've done land degradation, we've recently done sustainable use of wild species. When we're targeting youth engagement, are we also targeting youth knowledge and expertise in those specific areas, or is it more general than that?
That brings me to the meeting that we had in Nairobi just recently this May.
Welcome to Kenya. Mabibi na mabuana hamjambona. Whenever a visitor arrives or leaves in our home, we shout Ula to say, may they be meandering rivers following the fruits of your hands and to quench the thirst of your body. Ula means rain. Ula is a warm greeting.
We had the fellows with us. They came from 3 assessments that IPBES is undertaking: the invasive alien species assessment, the nexus assessments, and the transformative change assessment. And we gave the fellows the lead role to develop a capacity building activities so that we could build the capacities of youth participants at the meeting on these topics. And when they facilitate the discussions, for example, on the transformative change, how do youth understand this term? How do they see what kind of actions can you bring about to lead us in a transformative direction? So, and those input and those perspective of youth enriching this term and bringing that into the assessment process, it was highly valuable.
As a last question to you, Hong, how do you think we can improve IPBES engagement and get youth more involved? What do you think we can be doing better?
IPBES is an intergovernmental panel, but where possible, we have to create opportunities that are open for everyone. One example of that was that, we did a webinar on the call for experts and fellows for the business and biodiversity assessment. So to give information about what is the business and biodiversity assessments, what are their mandate, what are the experts that we are looking for, what it is to be an IPBES fellows in such an assessment, to provide people with information so that they can make decisions on whether or not they want to get involved in the process. In the way forward, I think we need to create more opportunities like this so that we can reach out to everyone that would like to join. And when it comes to the IPBES Youth Workshop, for example, it requires a lot of fundings to run such a workshop, but here we can also, work with partners. So the last youth workshop was the Isle of Bill, and the host of that was the government of Germany. And then they were so inspired that, now that they have funds to run a regional one for Europe and Central Asia, organized in support of IPBES, that also gives young people an opportunity to learn about IPBES and IPBES work. So this is the way we try to, again, amplify and reach out to more young people.
It sounds like we have the potential to really supercharge the science policy work that we're doing through the youth perspectives. Hong, a huge thank you to you and your colleagues who are working so hard on youth engagement. And also a big thank you to that very special introduction to that meeting in Nairobi from the Botswanan poet Nametsu.
Thank you.
Supercharging science policy through youth engagement. Oh man, I love that. There are so many things that kind of stand out for me, especially as someone who is not officially part of IPBES, someone kind of on the outside looking in and engaging in my own way. I think about how obvious it is that IPBES is putting these efforts in and investing effort and care into including perspectives and voices of so many different people. This is a generation who, on average, will have this space and place and habitat for longer than anyone else. That makes sense to have the people with the most to lose being able to speak up as much as they can.
Yeah. What I also took away from the interview with Hong was this perspective that she has, that I share, and I think you do, Britt, as well, that the youth voices help to introduce real urgency into both policy and science.
Yeah, I've mentioned in previous episodes how with adolescents and with teenagers, there can be a kind of power to the selfishness and introspection and me thinking when it comes to these huge processes and the role that they might play in them. And I think the same can be said for that lack of frontal lobe development. I mean, literally neurologically, youth are able to not necessarily think about these really long-term or really mushy gray area, but rather say now. We want to do this thing now, and we're not waiting for it. There's what we might consider rashness, or like, oh, they're just jumping to action. But literally that is what they're doing, jumping to action. And I think that there's a lot of power in that sometimes.
Where there's also a lot of power in the youth voices and the youth perspective, Britt, is how clear and convincing they can be and often are as communicators. And one of the things that I value as the head of communications for IPBES is the power that youth voices have in helping us to get the messages out and the findings out from the work that IPBES is doing. Because when they're conveyed by youth voices, they somehow carry so much more urgency and are able to mobilize so much greater interest and engagement.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite exercises to do in class when I'm working with teenagers and adolescents is have them learn a topic and then come together and teach each other in what we would call like a jigsaw activity. Not only does that let them learn more deeply because they're having to relay it to someone else, but they would much rather learn from each other than anything I'm going to say. They are necessarily more interesting to each other than the adult in the room.
And Britt, for the last interview of our season, for season 3, I was really pleased to hear from an incredible young activist for both youth and the environment. Kantuta Conde is from the Indigenous Aymara people from Bolivia. And Kantuta advocates for Indigenous people's rights and youth rights. She was one of those lucky 25 who Hong spoke about that joined the IPBES Youth Workshop on the Isle of Vilm last year in 2022. And she's been getting a lot more involved at an international level in IPBES's work more broadly. But as she told me, her involvement in nature and biodiversity was something she was literally born into.
It all started since I was little. My name is Kantuta, as you have heard. It's the name of an indigenous traditional flower here in Bolivia, an Aymara flower. And with this, I always felt I was connected with Mother Nature, with La Madre Tierra, and with Pachamama. And since then, my parents started having the promotion of land rights in indigenous peoples. And then I started thinking and following their path, thinking, as we protect indigenous land rights, indigenous territories, we also protect the biodiversity of the world and the biodiversity of Mother Nature.
Now, you've been involved in a number of different networks. Some of those are UN organizations, some of them are civil society, and obviously Indigenous peoples and local community type organizations. What have you, as a young person, experienced in your international exposure and these international processes that you've been part of?
What I have seen, particularly for youth and for Indigenous youth, is that we now have a space for our voices to be heard. Mm-hmm. However, that doesn't mean that our participation is taken into account. So what we are now is pushing for that.
So just having a seat at the table and the ability to have a voice is not the same as being taken into account and having impact, obviously.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they hear about the work that an organization like IPBES does or the IPCC on climate change, they immediately think of very specific Western science ideals. What kinds of things are youth voices and Indigenous youth voices particularly able to add into these processes?
As Indigenous peoples, we are not negating or saying that we don't need Western science. We also want to create a relationship, an effective relationship between Western sciences, but also Indigenous knowledge. And I think that IPBES has arrived there and has created a great relationship between them. Because when you see IPBES work, you don't see Western sciences as more important than Indigenous sciences, but you see them as equal. And that's how it should be.
So earlier in this episode, we were also speaking with Hong, who I know you know from the technical support unit on capacity building. And Hong was talking to us about some of the different activities that IPBES has undertaken for youth engagement more recently. One of these was the youth workshop that was held last year in Germany on the Isle of Vilm. You were one of the participants in that meeting, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I was one of the lucky candidates to have been chosen. I think that it was amazing because it was a very diverse group. We had many ages, we had many experiences, we had many interests. And I think that that was the unique part of it. You don't only have a space to learn particularly about IPE's mandate, but also get to know an amazing network of youth organizations around the world. And as we always say, intergenerational dialogue is highly important.
Of course. Well, I know from Hong that it was also very much a two-way dialogue. It wasn't just information being given to participants about IPBES and networking opportunities, but also that the participants made a very powerful contribution to some of the work that IPBES itself is doing. I know she mentioned the Nature Futures framework.
Yes, I think that one of the best memories I have from the workshop was actually thinking and having the question raised. How would you imagine the world if you had the best possible future for you regarding nature, regarding your life, everything? And I love that everyone had their own ideas. Everyone thought about different worlds where there's no technology, worlds where animals and people would live together. There was also people who would say, I want to go back to the past and have it as my ancestors have seen it, because they knew how to control the land and how to control the resources. And there were so many, and it was amazing. And I have that as one of the best memories from the workshop.
Great. Now, Kantuta, the youth and youth voices are increasingly important in IPBES. So if you had the opportunity to speak directly to the 140 IPBES member states, what's the one message you would want governments to really hear?
That's an amazing question and a very difficult one. I think that I would say that we as youth have an amazing, great knowledge of how to protect biodiversity and how to protect our future and your future. So let us, as youth, as Indigenous youth, protect that future with our knowledge and with our own proposals.
I like that. That's fantastic. Well, Kantuta, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure having you on the Nature Insight podcast.
Thank you.
What an inspiring young person and activist and community member on so many levels. You know, one of many things that are impressive about the activism of people like Kantuta is their commitment to justice, how intensely that is felt, for people and for the rest of nature within their work.
It was a fantastic interview, Britt, for us to be able to end this episode and indeed our season on as well, because as you say, Kantuta is not only incredibly inspiring, but also she has this wealth of knowledge and experience that really, I think, belies the fact of her youth. And one of the things for me is how positive she is about the future and about the opportunities to address some of these problems.
That positivity, I feel like, kind of helps the rest of us stay positive about the future. You know, they're going to be leading it. If they are the curators and guardians of this and they feel positive or they feel agency to do things that will help, I mean, that makes me feel better thinking about what comes next.
And it really is about agency, isn't it? I mean, Kantuta makes the point so clearly. It's not just about making space for voices. It's not just about offering a seat at a table. It really is about making sure those perspectives that are voiced are taken into account and are actually part of what's used.
Right. This is not just performative to have the photo op of, hey, look at this. We had people in the same room. You know, it's actually the relationships. Again, we're a social species. And creating these effective relationships, especially within this interview and perspective, you know, between Western science and Indigenous knowledge and wisdom. IPBES is doing so much on that front, and that's only possibly strengthening the kind of agency and the kind of decision-making we're going to see from stakeholders in the future.
Unfortunately, that's it for this episode, and for Season 3 of Nature Insight, Speed Dating with the Future. It has, as always, Britt, been an absolute pleasure and an education to share this space with you.
Thank you, Rob. I so enjoy our time together and getting to hear from these perspectives and experts and stories from the wider IPBES community. It has been fun and inspiring, as it always is. For me, it's clear that communicating what's going on within the science of biodiversity is absolutely critical in actually making transformative changes. And both you and I, Rob, are going to be kept very busy doing just that. On that note, it's goodbye from me, Britt Garner.
And from me, Rob Spall. If you've enjoyed this episode, then do listen to the other episodes in this season and all of those from seasons 1 and 2 as well.
And to learn more about IPBES's work, you can go to www.ipbes.net or on any of their social media channels. Just search for @IPBES. That's @IPBES. But for now, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next season of Nature Insight.